Ever had that moment at a holiday party when someone offers you a cookie and you wish you'd had a glass of water with you? Yeah, I've been there. And there's one very salty cookie that comes to mind that taught me a lot about my own judgment and also about empathy and what I needed to do to get there. Hey, everybody, I'm Rob Volpe. This is Reading Between the Lines. I'm joined by Domino right now, and we're going to be talking about empathy and how it shows up at holiday parties and cookie exchanges in particular. And I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my book. Tell me more about that, Solving the Empathy Crisis One Conversation at a Time, specifically from the chapter called The Moldy Pancake. The Moldy Pancake is a reader favorite, and it deals with how I, as an ethnographic researcher, was challenged and am challenged when I go into people's homes. They're making a food product for us and they offer us a taste. And what I've learned over the years is that it's really subjective what tastes good. One family's cherished recipe is another one's like, ooh, this needs more salt, or gag, I can't take anymore. But I can't be that way. I can't have that reaction in the moment. So I had to develop compensatory skills in order to overcome that. And so the moldy pancake in this particular chapter, there's a project I was working on years ago where we were going on in homes in Minneapolis to understand people's holiday baking practices and traditions. And in one particular group, we were doing what was known as a friendship circle. We were having a group of friends come together, and they were all bringing their own holiday recipes, favorite cookies to do an exchange. And it actually all ended up being chocolate chip cookies. So we got to try a lot of chocolate chip cookies. But let's dive in. This is the Moldy Pancake chapter from my book. Interesting is my first go-to phrase in these situations. It's the polite Midwestern way of saying, that's weird. I don't like it, without really offending. It's a Minnesota nice way of saying, this is the one of the most disgusting things I've ever tried, but thank you for sharing that prized family recipe with me. Unfortunately, enough people in the Midwest know that interesting is a word with a double meaning, and so that I can't use it when sampling a Midwestern stranger's cherished chocolate chip cookie recipe. Instead of interesting, I've developed my own automatic reaction when I try food in other people's homes. I'll tilt my head to the side while nodding appreciatively, usually with a sound and maybe a slight furrow of the brow to reflect that I can see how this is far from the worst brownie I've ever tried. And I appreciate the effort that they put into it. Now, I also recognize how it feels to put yourself out there at risk of being judged by others. I mean, seriously, making food to share is stressful. You are vulnerable to being judged. All eyes are on the person tasting, especially that first bite. As a result, the taster tries not to cast aspersion, hopefully, and instead you have a sample, chew, swallow a few bites, nod with appreciation, and then move on. That's what I do, whether I'm at a potluck or I'm offered food by a respondent during an interview. At one particular party, set in the inner suburbs of Minneapolis, there were four women gathered together around a table. Each baker introduced her cookie, where the recipe came from, and what was special about it. Remarkably, each chocolate chip cookie did taste different. The balance of chocolate, sugar, and sometimes nuts, as well as the thickness and how well the cookie was baked, made each one taste different. It was kind of like being a judge on the Great British Baking Show, except we could only taste, not provide our opinion. And with my Hoosier upbringing, it felt rude not to finish what was offered, so I always ate more than one taste. And then came one cookie that was different from the others. The woman who had baked them was lovely, with a big personality that added a lot to the conversation. She was in her early 50s and had a very matter of fact, that's the way it is way of telling her stories and relating to all of us. She also had a lot of love infused into her baking and talked about it that way. I was excited to try her cookies. These are going to be good, I thought. I took one and passed the container on to the clients who were with me. The cookie looked great. Big chunks of chocolate, really thick, nicely baked and brown throughout. Not even the slightest hint of charring on the bottom. I bit in. Texture, good. The first parts of the flavor were coming over my tongue. Milk chocolate morsels, hints of brown sugar, salt. Salt? Yes, that is salt that I'm tasting. And it was not the way dark chocolate is made more delicious by sea salt, or the way that the sweetness of caramel is moderated by salt. This was like iodized salt. Not so much salt that it was inedible or a mistake, like the sugar and salt got swapped, but it was definitely a heavy handed measurement of salt. In the moment, I was sitting there eating that salty cookie, trying to maintain my non judgmental composure while I figured out what I was tasting. She had said that the cookie was made with Crisco. Would that be the cause? Keep that slight smile on your face, Rob. Is Crisco salty? Rob, visibly engage with the cookie with your eyes and a nod of the head as though you're enjoying it. I'd never tried Crisco plain, but I didn't think there was any salt in it. Now, just swallow it, Rob, and you'll be done. No, it's not the Crisco. Smile in appreciation, Rob. Ask a follow-up about the recipe so it appears you're engaged. There's too much salt in it. Take a sip of water to cleanse the salt out of your mouth, Rob. Maybe this works for some people, but it is not to my taste. There. Isn't that better, Rob? But since taste is subjective, I had to roll with it and dismantle my judgment. This woman is revered by her friends as a good baker, so this must be something that she does and that her community likes. Plus, I don't want to be rude. It's not going to kill me, right? So that was a really salty chocolate chip cookie. But this is what that salty cookie reminded me. When somebody's sharing a recipe with you, they're actually sharing a story. It's a memory. It's a piece of home. It's part of their identity. And so when you're rejecting the food, especially if you're making a grimace, that can feel like you're rejecting them. And food amplifies this because there's so much emotion around it. As I said, this is about your identity. It can be a representation of your culture. It's my grandmother taught me this, or we make this every year in my household, or this is my signature cookie. In fact, those cookies that I just showed you, this is a holiday cookie that's tradition in my family. It's called a Tomasino cookie. And the recipe's been passed down by my grandmother, who got it from, I think, one of her sister-in-laws 80 years ago now, probably. And it is made every year in my family. I think it's a pretty great cookie. There are other people that may not feel that same way. And that's okay. That's their choice. And so this is where in the holidays we end up with this challenge because you may or may not like what somebody else is making, whether it's a cookie or a dip at a party or some other food that they're serving. And so that challenge creates the opportunity to practice empathy. So let me connect this back to the empathy framework, the 5 steps to empathy that I coach, especially the 3 steps that matter most at the table in these situations. And I'm going to do this in context with all 5 of the steps, but really focus on 3 of them. So step 1 is dismantle judgment. This is the biggest one, and that it's that first bite, and it's always a trap. Because when you're trying something, your brain is comparing the food to your own family traditions. I was comparing that chocolate chip cookie to others that I had made or tasted, and certainly the other people's that were at the table. And so that's creating judgment. And whether you mean to or not, it can come through. It can be an expression on your face. And if, your grandma's butter cookies are legendary, like I like to think mine are, everything else is going to get measured against them. So if I was tasting somebody else's butter cookies or Spritz cookies, I might be comparing against that, just like I was against other chocolate chip cookies. But empathy begins when you notice the comparison, the bias, those past experiences that you've had with other cookies, and you start to set it aside. It's about recognizing it and then saying, okay, I see that. I'm going to set that aside. That's the dismantle judgment part. Now, step two is asking good questions. And obviously, there's opportunities here to be asking questions about the recipe. And it's in step three, actively listen, that this really starts to help the baker or the person that you're speaking with really feel the empathy, because this isn't necessarily about listening to the words, hearing the words. It's about presence. And it's about noticing the things that their body language might be telling you, or the things that you're hearing in the tone of their voice. You might notice their pride when you ask them where the recipe came from. And you want to invite the story behind the dish in, because people will actually light up when you show genuine interest. And one of the ways that you show that interest is asking them questions and then really being present and listening and asking a follow-up question. Now, step four is integrating to understanding. That's making room in your head that, hey, there are different ways to make chocolate chip cookies, and I want to be open to the different ways that people are doing it and be okay with that. It doesn't mean that one way is right or wrong. It's just a different way of moving through the world. And that's when you can then get into step five, using solution imagination, because this is where you start to navigate the moment with kindness. And not loving a dish doesn't mean that you need to lie. It doesn't mean you have to fake enthusiasm, but it does mean you want to respond thoughtfully and maybe kindly. It's okay to say, this isn't my style or my taste, but I'd love to hear more because it's so evident how much care you put into this. Or tell me more about where this recipe comes from. Or your family must really enjoy making these together. You want to think about leaning into curiosity instead of critiquing. It's about connection instead of collision. So, as you head into the holiday season, whether it's a cookie exchange, a potluck, your office holiday party, that annual dessert table blowout, here are three simple things that you can do. First is to pause before responding. Remember, we've talked about taking a curious breath, and that is all about that moment where you pause, because the look on your face is half of the conversation. Take that nice deep breath, and that's going to give you a moment to shift from a reaction, which might offend, to a response that's more thoughtful, and it creates a chance to build empathy. The second piece is to ask one curious question. What makes this recipe special to you? And then you want to respond to the effort if you're not crazy about the flavor, because that's where the empathy lives. So if those questions are about the effort they're putting into it, the history behind it, you can have a conversation about that and you're really going to connect with them. Because the food brings us together, but empathy is what keeps us together collectively. So, if you'd like to read more from the Moldy Pancake or other parts of my book, I've linked to it on my website below. Tell Me More About That is also available wherever you buy books and in all of the formats. It also makes a great gift. I'd appreciate it if you'd check it out. And if you want more empathy tools like this, please hit like, hit subscribe, forward it on to a friend. And then tell me in the comments, what's the wildest holiday dish you've ever tried? And how did you react to that situation? I'd really love to hear your stories. So until next time, I'm Rob Volpe for Reading Between the Lines. Happy holidays, everybody. Ever had that moment at a holiday gathering when someone offers you a cookie and you really wish you had a glass of water with you. Ever had that moment at a holiday party? Come on, Domino, stop. Stop for you.